You wake up every day believing that you are the one making the decisions, that it's your will, your logic, and your effort that determine the course of your life. But what if that's not true? What if most of your choices are just unconscious repetitions of old patterns, installed in you long before you had any awareness of what it meant to choose? Perhaps that fear that arises without explanation, that giving up before even trying, that self-sabotage you call weakness. Perhaps none of that is really you. Perhaps it's just the reflection of an old programming, an invisible script that has been repeating for years, faithfully obeyed by parts in you that you've never met. The most dangerous thing about all this is the illusion of control. The idea that you're living your life when in reality, you're just reliving instructions that weren't written by you. Instructions inherited, absorbed, silently imprinted by voices that have already fallen silent, by experiences you don't even remember, but that continue shaping how you feel, act, and choose. The discomfort this idea provokes is understandable, but also necessary, because discomfort is the first sign that something inside you is beginning to awaken. So, before continuing, ask yourself with brutal honesty, how many of your decisions were born from the present, and how many were determined by the past you never questioned? The change you seek doesn't begin with willpower, nor with positive thinking. It begins at the root of the mind, there where everything forms, in the invisible territory of the subconscious. Perhaps you've already heard about the subconscious. Maybe you've even read books, watched videos, done exercises. But between understanding the concept and experiencing what it really means, there's an abyss. Because the subconscious is not a theoretical idea. It is the silent foundation upon which your entire life is built. It doesn't just influence what you feel. It defines what you perceive. It doesn't just interfere with your decisions. It selects the options you don't even see. While you believe you're choosing, the subconscious has already decided. It reacts before thought, feels before logic, retreats before you know there's risk. It is fast, silent, precise, and absolutely committed to one thing: protecting you. Only for the subconscious, protecting doesn't mean liberating. It means repeating, maintaining, preserving what is known, even if that keeps you trapped in a life that no longer represents you. The truth is that most of who you think you are, your reactions, your fears, your desires, are just conditioned responses. You were trained to be this way, trained by voices that said, "Be careful, it won't work, you're not capable," by looks that judged, by silences that wounded, by experiences that silently molded the structure of your inner world. And the cruelest part of all this is that over time, you stopped remembering that you're trained. You began to believe that this way of feeling is natural, that this way of hesitating is part of your identity. But it's not. And if you have the courage to face this head on, to recognize that the mind that commands your life today wasn't created by you, then yes, you can rewrite it. Because the subconscious can be conditioned, but it can also be liberated. It can be programmed, but it can also be reprogrammed. And the difference between a life of repetition and a life of transformation lies in who takes the reins, you or the old pattern that lives within you. You were taught to trust your consciousness, to believe that it's the one making decisions, solving problems, guiding your steps. After all, it's what you feel. It's what you dialogue with internally. It's what you believe you are. But what if this consciousness, so rational, so present, were nothing more than a delayed reflection of commands coming from deeper within? What neuroscience has already demonstrated with clarity, and what human experience confirms with pain, is that almost everything in you has already been decided before you even think. Your choices, your impulses, your judgments, all are born from a territory that operates in darkness, an invisible system, highly efficient, that acts for you while you believe you're in control. This system is your subconscious, and it doesn't just influence your life, it commands. It structures what you see as possible, defines what you consider dangerous, dictates the limits of your courage, and even what you call me. The mind that inhabits you, the one pulsing behind consciousness, is not an assistant. It is the true command center. The problem is that this center, however powerful it may be, is operating with old codes, outdated data, misinterpreted experiences, and never resolved traumas. Watch how this plays out in the theater of your daily existence. Sarah sits in the boardroom, her presentation ready, her expertise undeniable. But as her name is called, something ancient awakens in her chest, a tightening, a whisper of, "They'll see through you." She doesn't remember being 8 years old, standing before her father's friends, stumbling over words while they exchanged knowing looks. She doesn't recall the shame that branded itself into her nervous system that day, but her subconscious remembers everything. It holds that moment like a sacred truth. And in this boardroom, 30 years later, it floods her body with the same protective shutdown. Her voice wavers, not because she lacks knowledge, but because a child's wound is speaking through an adult's mouth. The child who was ignored today avoids speaking in public. The teenager who was humiliated today sabotages before trying. The part of you that once suffered and was never heard is still in control. And no matter how much you say, "Now I want to change," it responds with automatic programming, "Better not. It's not safe. It's not for you." You are living, but it's your wounded version that conducts. You believe you're evolving, but the foundation that supports your decisions is still rooted in fear, in scarcity, in defense mechanisms. And that's why conscious changes seem so fragile. You can even decide with force, but if your subconscious isn't realigned, it will find subtle ways to return you to the old. This invisible conductor doesn't distinguish between past and present, between the child you were and the adult you've become. Time collapsed the moment trauma was encoded. In its vast library of emotional memory, that 8-year-old's humiliation exists in eternal present tense, ready to be activated by any situation that resembles the original wound. Your subconscious doesn't know you've grown stronger, wiser, more capable. It only knows this feels familiar, and familiar once meant danger. And this isn't theory, this is you. It's the pattern that repeats every time you start and stop, that tries and gives up, that dreams and hides. It's the mind that inhabits you, not the one you chose, but the one programmed for survival. And as long as it commands, your life will be more of the same, until you decide to rewrite it. You say you want to change, that you want to grow, conquer, be free. But every time you try to take a new step, you feel a strange weight, a discomfort that doesn't come from outside, but from within. Something in you retreats. Something whispers that it's not the right time, that you're not enough, that maybe you weren't made for this. And that something is exactly what keeps you trapped. There exists a mechanism within your mind that operates with a single mission: to preserve. It doesn't want to know about your dreams. It doesn't care about your vision of the future. It only wants to keep you within the zone where everything is known, even if that means pain, frustration, or stagnation. This mechanism is your subconscious, and it acts like a guardian of the same. Everything that deviates from the pattern is treated as a threat. That's why freedom scares, why growth hurts, why even desiring transformation, you sabotage when it begins to happen. Because changing requires renouncing what is familiar, and the subconscious, programmed to protect, interprets the new as danger. It doesn't distinguish real risk from emotional risk. For it, taking a step outside the pattern is like jumping into an abyss, even when that jump is the path to healing. Imagine yourself as a bird that has lived its entire life in a golden cage. The bars have become so familiar they feel like home. The limited space, the predictable routine, the controlled environment, it's all you've ever known. And though the cage door has been opened, though freedom beckons just beyond the threshold, something in you clings to the familiar confinement. Because out there, in the vast unknown, anything could happen. In here, within these golden boundaries, you know exactly what each day will bring. The subconscious chooses the familiar prison over the uncertain paradise, every time. Your existential dilemma is you're simultaneously the prisoner and the guard, the captive and the captor. Part of you rattles against the bars, yearns for the sky, dreams of soaring. But another part, deeper, older, more influential, whispers seductive justifications for staying small. This cage is beautiful, it murmurs. This cage is safe. This cage is what you deserve. And so you remain, wings folded, dreams deferred, convincing yourself that limitation is wisdom and stagnation is peace. The pain doesn't come from change itself. It comes from the friction between who you want to be and who you're accustomed to being. It comes from the battle between the desire for freedom and the impulse to remain. Because being truly free is dangerous for the part of you that survived by repeating, that built walls, that learned not to feel too much, not to want too much, not to show too much. But here's what the guardian of the same doesn't understand. The very walls it built to protect you have become your prison. The mechanisms that once saved you are now the chains that bind you. What was once survival has become self-destruction. The cage that felt necessary when you were small and vulnerable now suffocates the giant you've grown to be. So now you're at this threshold. You have an internal calling to go beyond, but you also carry an internal system trained to keep you exactly where you are. This is your conflict. This is the invisible war. And until you consciously choose who will win, fear will continue disguised as prudence, and stagnation will continue pretending to be security. Maybe what you need now is not more strength, but clarity. It's not that you're weak, it's that you were fighting in the wrong place. While you spent energy trying to control your behaviors on the surface, the root remained intact, firm, buried in the unconscious. And that's why everything always comes back. But here's the turning point. Your brain is not a block of stone. It is fertile ground, alive, plastic. Science has a name for this: neuroplasticity, the capacity your brain has to remodel itself, to reconnect, to rewrite its own pathways. This is not a metaphor, it's physiology. Every time you feel something new, think something new, or act in a different way with intensity and repetition, you literally alter the architecture of your brain. New pathways form, old patterns weaken, the new begins to breathe. But there's a condition. Thinking isn't enough. You need to involve emotion. You need to repeat. You need to act, even when you don't believe yet. Because the subconscious doesn't respond to logic. It responds to experience. And experience, for it, is what repeats with enough intensity to become identity. This is the profound mystery of becoming. You are both the sculptor and the clay, the gardener and the seed. Every moment of conscious choice is a chisel strike against the marble of your conditioning. Every deliberate act of courage is water poured onto the soil of possibility. And slowly, so slowly you might not notice at first, something fundamental shifts in the quantum field of your being. Your nervous system begins to recognize a new baseline, where once it knew only the familiar hum of anxiety, it starts to attune to frequencies of calm. Where once it braced for rejection, it begins to soften into receptivity. This isn't mere positive thinking. This is cellular reformation. Your body learns that it's safe to breathe fully, to stand tall, to take up space. The new self doesn't just exist in your mind. It inhabits your flesh, rewrites your posture, changes the very rhythm of your heartbeat. And this transformation requires daily nourishment, like tending a sacred fire. Each morning you wake, you have a choice. Feed the old patterns with familiar thoughts and reactions, or nurture the emerging identity with conscious intention. The new self is tender at first, like a sprouting plant that needs protection from harsh winds. But with consistency, with devotion, with the patient repetition of new truths, it grows stronger. Its roots deepen, its voice grows more confident. That's why real change begins when you act as if you already were what you desire to be, even with fear, even with doubt, even without external proof. Transformation doesn't wait for your total belief. It happens while you rehearse being someone new, until that someone stops being rehearsal and becomes you. And at that point, everything changes. You stop resisting and you begin to breathe differently. You begin to exist differently. Before we continue, I want to ask you to stop for an instant and notice what's happening inside you. Not what you think intellectually, but what you feel in your body, in the spaces between conscious thoughts. Maybe discomfort has arisen, maybe resistance, maybe even unexpected relief. Whatever it is, if you've made it this far, you've already crossed a threshold that many avoid. Most people listen to this type of message for a few seconds and then close it, return to noise, to distraction, to the pattern. But not you. You remained. And this simple act already represents a rupture. The truth is, there's no change without witness, without a moment when you, even in silence, declare, I saw, I felt, I recognize. And that's why I want to invite you to leave this moment registered, not for me, for you. Write in the comments, now, with simplicity and presence, I take control. Let this symbolic gesture be your first conscious word within this new language being born in you. Each active affirmation is like a spark within mental darkness. It shows the subconscious that something is changing, that a new command center is forming. And if this path makes sense, if something in you recognizes this journey as necessary, consider subscribing to this channel. Because this isn't just about videos, it's about internal construction, about continuity, about never going back again. What you began now can be the beginning of the liberation you've waited for an entire lifetime. Reprogramming the mind is not a mental act, it is an emotional ritual. The subconscious doesn't speak the language of ideas. It responds to repetition, to image, to the intensity of what is felt. Therefore, all transformation begins when you learn to speak with it, not with loose words, but with internal symbols, with experiences marked by emotion. That's how you convince it. That's how you re-educate it. That's how it begins to yield space to the new. The first tool is affirmation, but not in the empty way it's been trivialized. Affirmation isn't reciting phrases on autopilot, hoping something will change magically. Real affirmation is presence. It's emotion placed in words. It's saying with your body, with your eyes, with your chest, I am free. I am capable. I am enough. The subconscious registers what repeats with feeling. So it's not enough to speak. You must feel each letter as if it were already truth. Because for it, everything experienced with emotional intensity is interpreted as reality. Stand before the mirror of your becoming and speak these words not as wishes, but as declarations of what already exists in the realm of possibility. Feel the weight of I am worthy settle into your bones. Let I am powerful resonate in your solar plexus until it becomes as natural as breathing. This isn't self-deception, this is self-creation. You are announcing to every cell in your body, to every neural pathway in your brain, that a new truth is taking residence. The subconscious mind, that ancient keeper of identity, listens not to the words, but to the conviction behind them. It measures the depth of your belief not by your thoughts, but by the emotional charge you carry. When you affirm with your whole being, voice trembling with truth, eyes bright with possibility, heart open to what could be, you create a vibrational signature that your deepest mind cannot ignore. You become a living prayer, a walking affirmation, a breathing declaration that change is not only possible, but inevitable. Close your eyes now and step into the theater of your transformed life. See yourself walking into that room with confidence, radiating from every pore. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet as you speak your truth without apology. Notice how your shoulders sit differently when you're no longer carrying the weight of old shame. Hear the sound of your voice, clear, strong, authentic, as you express ideas that once seemed too bold to voice. Smell the air of possibility that surrounds you. Taste the sweetness of self-acceptance on your tongue. Let every sense participate in this preview of your becoming. This is not fantasy. This is preparation. You are training your nervous system to recognize this new reality as home. You are teaching your subconscious that this version of you is not only possible, but inevitable. Each visualization is a blueprint. Each imagined scene, a rehearsal for the life that awaits your commitment to growth. The third tool is micro-actions, small daily gestures that challenge the old pattern. It doesn't need to be a great life turnaround. It just needs to be that every day you do something your old version would avoid. A yes where there used to be no. A step forward where there used to be retreat. A gentle confrontation with fear. Just enough for the subconscious to understand something is different. And when it perceives this, it begins to reorganize. It begins to align your perceptions, your responses, and even your physical sensations with this new reality you insist on living, even before it becomes visible. The language of the invisible is silent, but powerful. When you learn it, you no longer need to fight against yourself. You begin to cooperate with the deepest part of your being. And that's when the miracle happens. What was effort becomes flow. What seemed like resistance transforms into surrender. And what was once just a desire becomes your new way of existing. After you begin to change, something strange happens. A silence settles in, as if all of reality held its breath, waiting to see if you'll continue or retreat. And in that silence, something ancient awakens. The old voice, the one you know well, even though you've never named it. It whispers that you're going too fast, that maybe you're deluding yourself, that it doesn't make sense to try to be different. It's subtle, but cutting, almost as if it were saying, "Come back, it's safer here." This is the moment when many give up, not because they don't desire change, but because they confuse this voice with intuition. But this isn't your soul speaking. It's the pattern screaming for its survival. Because for the subconscious, every new behavior is a threat. Even if the old made you suffer for years, it's still familiar. And the familiar for the unconscious mind is synonymous with protection. What you feel now is not failure, it's withdrawal. Withdrawal from the old self, the one who knew how to act within limits, who knew the rules of self-punishment, who knew how to survive without expanding. Now this self is losing space, and like every system in disorder, it resists, it agitates, it contracts, it wants you back. But there's something deeper happening here, something that cuts to the very essence of what it means to let go. You're not just changing behaviors or thoughts, you're grieving a death. The death of the self you've known, however painful that self may have been. There's a strange melancholy in watching the familiar dissolve, even when the familiar was your prison. That anxious self, that fearful self, that small self, it was yours. It was how you knew yourself in the world. And now, as it begins to fade, you find yourself in the strange territory of not knowing who you are. This is the grief of transformation, mourning the identity that kept you safe, even as it kept you small. There's a tenderness here, a necessary sorrow for the parts of you that learned to hide, to shrink, to apologize for existing. These wounded aspects of your psyche served a purpose once. They were your protection, your survival strategy, your way of making sense of a world that felt unsafe. And now you're asking them to step aside, to trust that there's another way to be. In this space between selves, you might feel hollow, undefined, like a house whose walls have been torn down, but whose new foundation hasn't yet been laid. This emptiness isn't a sign that you're failing. It's evidence that you're succeeding. You're creating space for something unprecedented to emerge. The old identity clings because it knows that once it's gone, There's no guarantee of what will take its place. It would rather maintain a painful but predictable existence than risk the uncertainty of becoming. And you need to recognize this, not as a sign of error, but as proof that you're exactly where you should be. Every true transformation passes through this crossing, a dark, silent, uncomfortable stretch, a bridge between who you were and who is still forming. And it's here, in this limbo, that many return. But you won't, because now you understand that this pain isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of liberation. The self without a name is tender, vulnerable, still learning how to breathe in this new atmosphere of possibility. Honor this transition. Be gentle with the grief. Let yourself mourn what you're leaving behind, even as you step toward what you're becoming. This is not weakness. This is the courage to die to one identity so that another might be born. You made it this far, carrying doubt, fear, internal friction, but also something new, something still unnamed but pulsing differently within you. It's as if behind all the layers of repetition, another face began to emerge, a self you don't know well but somehow already recognize, a self that doesn't yet have a name but has presence. It's at this point that reconstruction begins, not from external goals, but from a new internal reference. You begin to understand that true change isn't just a swap of habits, it's an exchange of identity, because the subconscious doesn't act from what you want, it acts from who you believe you are. And as long as you continue seeing yourself with the eyes of the old, you'll continue living the life it allows. But something has changed. You no longer see yourself as before. The tired look no longer convinces you. The internal voice of the old pattern no longer echoes with the same force. And even without knowing exactly what the next step will be, you begin to walk. Because the new doesn't need to come with a map. It just needs space, surrender, action sustained by intention. With each small choice aligned with this new vision of yourself, you reinforce the new code. With each gesture, each thought that challenges the old, the subconscious updates its reading of who you are. And when it understands that your new identity is stable, it stops resisting. It begins to collaborate. It changes along with you. The self that was once just desire now begins to become future memory. You're no longer just trying to be. You already are, even though still in transition. And that's all that matters. Because the unconscious only needs this: repetition, emotion, and congruence. You're offering all three. Do you remember what we said at the beginning? Whatever we plant in the subconscious mind and nourish with repetition and emotion will one day become reality. Earl Nightingale. Now you understand the weight of these words, because they're no longer just a beautiful thought. They're a mirror, a map, a living code. Throughout your entire life, you've been planting, even without knowing. Fear, guilt, limitation, denial. All of this was sown, watered, reinforced, and harvested. Now it's time to cultivate something new. Maybe you don't see the fruits yet. Maybe the terrain still seems dry, but something is already sprouting. A new narrative, a new sensation in the body, a different silence within the mind. And this is already everything, because what transforms isn't certainty, it's movement. The courage to see yourself differently, to declare yourself in change, even while trembling, to become, even without knowing exactly what. And from now on, everything you repeat with truth, everything you visualize with emotion, everything you practice with intention will be absorbed. The subconscious is listening. It doesn't resist forever. It just waits for consistency. It wants to know if it's safe to follow you, if the new voice is firm, if the new path is real. And you're showing that it is. So continue. Plant, repeat, feel. Reinforce the image of this new self until it becomes more familiar than the old, until fear is no longer your native language, until control returns to your hands. Because the truth is simple, and now you know it. You don't need to be a slave to your mind. You can be the gardener of your soul. If you made it this far, it's because this message was for you. And now that you've arrived, you no longer need to return to the old. But you also don't need to run. Just follow. one step at a time, one reinforcement of each choice, a new truth planted with consciousness. The next seed is already ready. Watch now our latest video, The Real Reason You're Anxious and Why Nothing Seems to Work, where we talk about the hidden roots of anxiety and why so many attempts at healing fail. This journey you've begun isn't a solitary path carved through wilderness. It's a well-worn trail walked by countless souls before you, each leaving their own markers of transformation. The road ahead is illuminated not by the harsh light of certainty, but the gentle glow of possibility. Each video, each insight, each moment of recognition is another stone placed deliberately on this ancient path of becoming. You're not just consuming content, you're participating in the most sacred act of human existence, the conscious evolution of consciousness itself. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is the moment. Each new video is another key, another crossing, another reunion with what you've always been. The trail continues, winding through territories of the soul you've never explored. Trust the path, trust the process, trust the part of you that brought you this far and knows, with quiet certainty, that there's so much more waiting to be discovered. Until next time, take care of your mind, your soul, and your truth. You're no longer alone on this path. Not anymore.